Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event. Let's get ready to rumble!
And that's right, everybody. Welcome back once again to another edition of the Best Seat in the House podcast. As always, I'm your host, Rob Kramer, joined by my co-host, Daniel Bobo Carlin. And Dan, how you doing today, buddy?
Man, there's just a lot going on today after that game on Monday. I was probably another one of those games where I'm yelling at the Zebras for non-calls, and you know who else was upset about the Zebras? My mom!
Yeah. I definitely agree with you on that. There was definitely, as Coach Laviolette pointed out, there was definitely a missed call leading up to the goal that would eventually put them up 3-2. They tack on an empty net goal at the end where the Rangers were trying to, even the score up. Unfortunately, that didn't go down. And, the Rangers ended up losing 4-2 to the Florida Panthers. And, back-to-back losses for the Rangers now. But, hey, the Rangers have put themselves in a really good position. And losing to one of the top teams in the league, like the Florida Panthers, really isn't much to be worried about, especially where we come up now to the trade deadline on this Friday. And, the Rangers have the opportunity now to address a lot of needs that they have on their team and everything else. So let's start off with that news, Dan, as earlier today, this afternoon, the news broke. Now, we knew on Monday that this was a possibility, as they were saying that the Rangers were one of the front runners, and Alex Wennberg from the Seattle Kraken was pulled from practice on Monday, and they said for trade reasons. So everybody knew that Wennberg was in the process of being dealt. The only question was to who. That shoe dropped today, and it was revealed to be the New York Rangers in exchange for a second-round pick this year and a fourth-round conditional pick next year. And Seattle retains 50% of his salary. This, Dan, actually is the first ever trade executed between the two franchises, the New York Rangers and the Seattle Kraken. So that's noteworthy for that reason. But what are your feelings about this deal? Because I think it definitely helped address the Rangers, a couple of needs on their team.
Yeah, well, for one, I think this one definitely was a big one. We definitely needed a center. Now we only need a right wing, and hopefully that's gonna come. That news is gonna come soon. Hopefully in the form of a Jake Gensel. Maybe a Frank Vetrano's down. We'll never know, but I'm keeping my eyes out, hitting the refresh button on every social media feed I could think of.
Yep, exactly, man. And the thing about that is right now we're going to be locked in for the next 48 hours or so until the deadline on Friday. I forget if it's like a 4:00 deadline or a noon deadline, whatever it is. We're definitely going to be locked in until Friday. And, the Rangers already made this big move. There really had not been many moves. This had been one of the slowest lead ups to a trade deadline that we've seen over the last couple of years. I mean, they said earlier this afternoon, there had only been, I believe, two prior to the Rangers deal that they pulled off with the Kraken. There had only been two deadline deals pulled off. One was Mantha going from the Capitals to the Golden State, the Golden State. I'm botching this one right now. The Vegas Golden Knights picked him up, and there was one other trade. I forget who it was, but at this time last year, there had already been 18 trade deadline deals. So it was a very slow developing market that we saw just pick up. And then earlier today, I got my first inkling that the other shoe is about to drop, as former Ranger from last season, Vladimir Tarasenko, was traded from the Ottawa Senators to the Florida Panthers. So that helps shore their up, their offense up a little bit. But the now the Rangers picked up Wennberg, and that's a pretty good move for them. Have you looked into what type of player Alex Wennberg is yet that the Rangers are adding?
Yeah, I heard this is an excellent pickup at center that just feels like it complements the rest of the offense. I've heard good things from some sources I've had from Seattle about Wennberg.
I
So
like that. I like it.
yep. Speaking of sources, a friend of mine that's in the city happened to run into Jacob Trouba and saw him in a walking boot, which raises some
Yeah,
eyebrows there.
that's the word going around that I saw a couple of people mention on Twitter. Me and you chatted about this before we went live. So that is definitely something to keep an eye on. Unfortunately, we don't have any news one way or the other confirming or denying that the Rangers don't, practice again at their facility until tomorrow. So I guess we could see what happens. We'll see if Wennberg joins the team tomorrow. We'll see if any other moves happen between now and then, where I'm sure probably around 10 o'clock tomorrow they'll be conferring for their morning skate. But yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on, because if Trouba's in a walking boot and there's anything wrong with him from an injury perspective, then that might open up the chance where the Rangers have to not only now pick up another right wing we're going to talk about in a second, but maybe even go after a defenseman too, right?
Yeah, I can't see that being any big deal. I'm hoping it's just something that he's just kind of keeping it easy, but it's one of those injuries that it's just maybe a bump, maybe a bruise, and he's managed to maybe hold up on the ice, because you know how it is in hockey. Sometimes you get some little bruise and they'll play through it the rest of the year and they'll pull off. And sometimes even with those moments where they're having a little bump of the woods, a little ailment, they somehow come through with a big moment.
Yeah, very true. Very true, Dan. You're absolutely right about that. And, we just got to keep our fingers crossed that is the case, that it's not anything too bad for Vetrano right now. And
No, I think you
I'm
meant
sorry.
Jacob Trouba.
Yeah, I was just going to correct myself. Thank you. Yes, for Trouba, but I was getting ahead of myself right now because I was looking at what we were going to be going to next. And right now, the next thing we're going to be talking about is who is next for the Rangers. We got a couple of possibilities going out there right now. One of the guys I want to bring up to you that me and you've been talking about for a couple of weeks now, and I'm sure really anybody talking about the Rangers has talked about this guy, former Ranger Frank Vatrano. He's already got a career high 29 goals this year. Really is a top line player at a very affordable contract too, by the way. The Rangers can still pick him up even without any salary retained, which they probably will have salary retained, so maybe they can even bring in one more guy. But the Rangers can still fit him on the books, and he's on the books next year for just about $3.6 million, which for a cap-strapped team like the Rangers, a top-line guy like Vatrano being that cheap. I mean, look, I know a lot of Ranger fans don't want to give up a first-round pick, but to me, having your top right wing line established this year for the playoffs, and in the back of your head that you got him for next year too, that's worth a first round pick in my book, right? What do you think?
Yeah, that is definitely worth it, especially with how good this team looks like. This team's right there on the cusp of greatness, and and when your team is on that cusp of that, you got to make those moves.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. You're right about that. And the other thing too that we have to keep in mind is that it might not necessarily take a 2024 first round pick to get this deal done. I've heard rumblings that it could be a 2025 first round pick, which would be much more palatable for the Rangers to get rid of. If you can hold on to your first round pick, and hey, even if they're not going to make a move for use that selection, they could use that towards their roster for next year. So it's always good to hold on to the draft pick if you can. But as I already said, I would not have a problem giving up a first round pick for 2 years of Frank Vetrano. He's proved he could do it here. He's proved he could do it in the playoffs, and he's playing like a first line guy right now. So I have no reason to doubt Frank Vetrano in any way. But that isn't the only option, Dan, because we're just getting into a slew of options the Rangers have. One of the guys that just came in on the possibility today is Pavel Buchnevich, and Pavel Buchnevich, I've heard that the Blues are open to moving him. The Rangers would have to get creative. They might have to bring in another team to, the whole broker a deal thing now that we've been seeing going on, where you bring in a third team to retain a certain percentage of the salary to facilitate this trade going through, exchange for draft compensation. So that would be a big move for the Rangers. Maybe they could bring in a third team. But what would you think about that? I mean, not counting what's going on with Vetrano at all. On a side note, how would you feel about the Rangers with a reunion with former Ranger Pavel Buchnevich?
I'd be down with that. I'd be down with that reunion.
And is there anything like that you wouldn't want to give up for him? Like, how about if the Blues came to the Rangers, or the Rangers went to the Blues, right? And the Blues told them, hey, look, we're willing to give up Pavel Buchnevich, but we want your first round pick this year. We want another pick next year, maybe a second, maybe a third, whatever that may be, and a roster player. So maybe you're giving up Rempe, maybe you're giving up Edstrom, or possibly Kakko. A lot of teams have been asking for Kakko. What would your willingness be to pull off a trade if you have to give up a little bit more like that?
It would have to be Ekstrom or Kakko, because I just feel like Rempe is just such a key player that it's just he looks like a big role player. Like you kind of need that goon on a team.
So at this point, you value Rempe higher than Kakko?
Yeah, I just feel like, especially when it comes to playoff time, you're going to face these tough opponents that you're just going to need that goon on a team.
I agree with you, though. I definitely want Rempe on the team, but I think I still value Kakko higher than Rempe. But I agree with you. I wouldn't want to get rid of either one of them. And the guy that I would give up is Edstrom if I had to. And I wouldn't really want to either.
Yeah, exactly. Wouldn't want to, but that would be the guy we'd be willing to give up. Because I just feel like down the playoffs, you're gonna face these really tough physical opponents. Like I feel like if you face the Flyers in the playoffs, I feel like they're gonna be a tough physical opponent. I just feel like Florida's gonna be like that. Another one that gives us such an advantage. And I think even Carolina could be like that.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right about that. Speaking of the other East Coast teams too that we're going to be dealing with, one team that we don't have to worry about that's really actually having their worst season in 18 years, believe it or not. I couldn't believe it had been that long, but I guess they've had a hell of a run with Sidney Crosby in their 4 cups, but or 3, I think it is actually. But the Penguins right now are looking to rebuild, and it's getting to that point right now. And 2 guys right now from their cup years and from their highly talented offensive skill players is Jake Gunsel and Evgeny Malkin, who 2 guys that we've seen win cups with the Penguins and be big time playoff contributors. We've seen it against the Rangers, we've seen it against other teams, we've seen it in the Stanley Cup final. These guys are big time players. Now, I don't know what it would take to get either one of these guys. I know former Ranger Rod Duguay is really, really pulling for Evgeny Malkin. I don't know what he really has in his mind. I haven't heard anybody else mention Malkin as a possibility, but Duguay is really, really pushing it right now. What are your thoughts on this, Dan? Would you want to go after either one of these guys?
Yeah, I would, especially like either one of those two, because they just bring so much playoff experience and so much cup winning experience to this team that I just feel like it just adds a whole new dimension to this team.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Uh, one thing that people forget is that the way that Laviolette really tried to start spreading out the Rangers' talent in that top nine was that when the Rangers first came into camp, they had Philip Hedl as their number 2 center, and Vincent Trocheck, who is a high-paid free agent who's played very well over the last 2 years here. They actually had him starting on the third line. Now, obviously, Trocheck's still going to get all the playing time. He's going to get a lot of penalty kill. He's going to get he's a great face-off guy. He's going to get some power play opportunities. So, Trocheck was going to get his time. But when they first started this year, they had Philip Hedl listed as their number 2 center. So getting a guy like Malkin, who's a center, this allows you to take Johnny Brodzinski out of the lineup. And look, the Rangers should give Johnny Brodzinski a medal because that guy played awesome when he was here. The only thing is he's not the offensive force, especially at 5-on-5, that the Rangers need to be a difference maker, So bring in Wennberg to take his spot on the third line is big. Then now you have Trocheck. Then you could possibly even send Edstrom back down, bump Barclay Goodrow over to the left, move Wennberg down to the fourth line, and then you could even put Evgeny Malkin or Trocheck on your second or your third line. So that really gives the Rangers a lot of opportunities. Then you keep Rempe on the team, and the only thing you're losing, then that means you'd have to decide, would you rather have Evgeny Malkin as your center on the second or third line, or Edstrom on your fourth line and as your left wing? And as much as I like Edstrom, I think, having a chance to get a guy like Evgeny Malkin in there and you're still keeping Rempe on the team, I think that would be tough to pass up.
Yeah, that'd be tough. Like I feel like we'd be a really tough opponent during the playoffs with those guys on a team.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Now you'd probably have to choose between Gunsel or a Malkin. And to be honest, actually, if I had to choose between the two, I might want Gunsel over Malkin. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I kind of agree too. I just feel like Gunsel would be a better one to go with.
Yeah, especially since it depending what you do, like Malkin's a left-handed shot, so you'd have to worry about that if you're not playing him at center. He'd have to be on the left, which the Rangers already have far too many players on the left, between Edstrom, like we mentioned, Kreider, Panarin. They have all these guys over there. So it definitely would be a good move for the Rangers to pick up a right-handed guy, the right-handed shot that plays on the wing like Gunsel. So definitely am open to that. The other thing too, Dan, I wanted to ask you is that we've seen, I think that with the Rangers defense, picking up Wennberg is a big move because even though he's an offensive player, this is a guy that slots in on that third line and he's going to be killing penalties. He's really great at jamming guys up in the neutral zone. So I think picking up Wennberg does help their defense, overall. But a lot of people are pointing out that a guy like Gustafsson, right? Who I'm a big fan of Gustafsson. I feel like he's really stabilized that third line for the defense. But people make the point too that he's a little shoddy defensively, and that's the type of thing that can come back and bite you in the playoffs. So let me ask you this question. Would you want to mess with the Rangers defense at all? Or, do you want to stick with these 6 guys that we got right now? Or would you be interested in possibly flipping a guy like Gustafsson and bringing in a more reliable third pair defenseman that's like a more traditional stay-at-home defenseman?
I would be down for that, depending if the offer was right and who was available.
So you wouldn't have, because I know the only reason I even ask, because, hey, you're going to shore up the defense, 99% of fans is going to say yes. But the only reason I ask is because some fans have raised the red flag. Hey, we messed with the chemistry of this team last year, and it bit us in the ass. Now our defense actually has some pretty good chemistry going for them. Do you want to mess with that too? And to be honest, I wouldn't really have a problem with it, and it sounds like you don't have a problem with it either.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with it as long as they don't over mess with it.
Yeah, and you have to be smart about it. If you're going to change one defenseman, if you're going to move Gustafsson and bring in another guy to just take his spot, okay, I get that. But if you're going to, try to move like Keandre Miller and Gustafsson, and then you're bringing in two new guys to the defense, I don't think you could be doing that. I don't want to mess with it too much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't want to mess with it too much.
Yeah. Now, the other thing, too, that helped the Rangers out today is that, as we mentioned in that Alex Wennberg trade with the Seattle Kraken, is that the Rangers got the Kraken to retain 50% of that salary. So that does help the Rangers out a lot and give them the ability to pick up another guy or possibly even two. So, I feel like the Rangers do have the cap space to address their needs. And it helps them even more that they still have the ability to bring in another team to be that, as we mentioned, that broker team to kind of take a 25, percent hit on the cap too of whatever players the Rangers are targeting now, right?
Yeah, I just feel like they have that now. It's just gonna be a real interesting next couple of days.
Yeah, man, and we're under 48 hours away from the trade deadline right now. You know what, Dan? I think we're just about done with a bunch of our Rangers points. How about this? How about we're gonna make this a little bit of a shorter episode today? We'll keep it around a half hour, and maybe a little bit more than that. Until we're done, and then after the trade deadline's passed on Friday, how about we do a bonus episode on Saturday? And then that will be, we'll talk about the trade deadline and what happened, and we'll do it live on YouTube, and we'll do it, across all the other social media platforms. What do you think about that?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely down for that.
Okay, cool. So we'll keep this to hockey specific today. One other thing too I wanted to get into before we start getting to the last couple of points here is earlier this week, the Devils, they fired their head coach, Lindy Ruff. Now, if you remember, Lindy Ruff was their head coach last year when they made the playoffs, and they were one of the most dangerous teams out there, and they beat the Rangers in the first round. And now they've had a really rough year this year. They've had a slew of injuries to deal with. They've had a bunch of players underperforming. And head coach Lindy Ruff, a former Ranger assistant head coach, got fired, and actually is a former Ranger player too, Lindy Ruff. Now Lindy Ruff gets fired, and the Devils have to pick up the pieces. What do you think, Dan? Do you think that this was the right move, or do you think this was a reactionary move?
I feel this was a reactionary move so late in the season to make a coaching change this late in the season. It doesn't usually work that well when you're making this move so late in the season.
And let's not forget, Lindy Ruff gets a lot of grief. I mean, when he was a Rangers head coach here, he got, I mean, not head coach, but he was an assistant coach under the former head coach. Who is it? David Quinn was the head coach, while Lindy Ruff was an assistant here. And Lindy Ruff got so much grief from Ranger fans for everything because he was in charge of the PK and he was in charge of a bunch of stuff. So anytime the Rangers struggled, which let's remember too, when the Rangers had these guys in there, this was a different team. This wasn't the nearly finished product that we see today. This was a Rangers team that was very young and in a rebuild mode. So I felt like he got way too much criticism from Ranger fans. But he's getting a lot of criticism today from Devils fans too. And, this is a guy that got them to the second round of the playoffs last year. So I agree with you that I do think it was kind of a reactionary move. But, well-respected Rangers writer Larry Brooks of the New York Post, when this news broke out on Monday, his initial tweet was, "What took so long?" So I don't understand, Dan. What do you can you put your finger on what the disdain that some people have for Lindy Ruff is? Because let's not forget, he's in the top 10 all time in NHL wins as a head coach. So this guy is a heck of a head coach.
Yeah, this guy has a lot of credibility for the head coach. I don't know what's wrong. Maybe he didn't work out well with this team. Maybe he didn't. Maybe it wasn't something that just worked well with this team specifically. But I feel they should have if they were going to fire him, they should have done it a lot earlier. Because this late in the season, so it's going to be a tall order for a team to get under a new system this late in the season. I feel you have to have a huge chunk of the season left in order to do like a firing to get this team adjusted and everything.
Yeah, to be honest, Dan, I think that the way that they're looking at it right now is that they don't think they're making the playoffs. I think they kind of look at their situation and realize that it's not happening. And the only thing I can think of is that they just said, you know what, let's blow it up from a coaching perspective. And get him out of here and maybe bring our next guy in. That way next year, we don't have to worry about firing him. But hey, I think Lindy Ruff, he doesn't get enough respect. This is a guy that is and should be one of the highest respected coaches in hockey, and you see, a lot of fans and media personalities can't wait to get him out the door. And look, the Ranger fans were celebrating when he got fired here, which I didn't understand because you don't want to see anybody get fired.
And Lindy Ruff didn't really get fired here. What happened was during that time between the COVID lockdown and when they resumed the season and went straight into the playoffs, the Devils hired him and he was given permission to be interviewed by the Devils for the head coaching position.
That is true, but it was also that the Rangers weren't going to re-up his deal. So even though the Devils did kind of take him from the Rangers, you are right. The Rangers weren't bringing him back. So, that is true. But I don't understand. I never understood the grief that he got from Rangers fans. I thought it was way too much. And look, he goes to the Devils, he leads them to the playoffs, and he kicks our ass out of the postseason. So, who had the last laugh there? And the answer is Lindy Ruff,
Yeah, exactly. Somehow I don't know how that first round loss still shocks me from last year that we lost the first round like that. I did not see that happening.
Neither did I, especially the way that the way those first two games in New Jersey started off when the Rangers just blew the Devils out both games. And, Chris Kreider through two games in that series had 4 power play goals. It just looked like the Rangers were going to steamroll them. And in those last 5 games, everything fell apart. And, unfortunately, they weren't able to rebound. But, I did want to ask you, Dan, obviously the Rangers right now, they ended up losing to Florida on Monday. Florida picks up another 2 points when they beat the Devils last night at the Rock in their first game in the post-Lindy Ruff era. So the Panthers actually have a 6-point lead on the Rangers now, but they've played one more game than the Rangers this season. So the Rangers have some chasing to do in the President's Trophy standpoint and from the standpoint of being the number one team in the conference. But right now, the Rangers are still the front leading team in the Metropolitan Division, and they're looking to win their first division title since that President's Trophy team in 14-15. So right now, as this team stands, let's just say only counting the deals that we have right now, Wennberg on the team, and we still haven't gotten anybody else yet. Do you think the Rangers have enough right now to hang on and win their first division title in 9 years?
I believe so. I believe so. I feel a little bit more comfortable. I would just feel a little bit more comfortable if we made one more move.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's definitely true. Definitely, as all we've mentioned all the guys that we've mentioned so far. They definitely have to, you know, bring somebody in. So, but if the season did end today, like I mean, if they picked somebody else up, we would both feel much better about it. But if the season ended today, um, you you think they have enough to pull it off?
Yeah, I feel like they would have enough to pull it off. They'd be right there in the thick of it.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt about it, man. And that's something to definitely keep in mind as the trade deadline over the next couple of days. Because hey, if me and you were right, then that means any move that the Rangers make, um, you know, is just a cherry on top, pretty much. So we gotta hope that Chris Drury is looking to find that right cherry on top. And me and you talked about a lot of the different things going on with this team. Right now, I did want to ask you though. I did want to ask you so far the as we approach the trade deadline, less than 48 hours away. We've made that very clear in this episode today. But I want to ask you who you think right now the Rangers 23-24 MVP is for the season.
I just have to feel like Panarin is the MVP of the season. He's just having one of his best seasons this year so far.
Yeah, yeah, especially from a goal scoring standpoint. He's got 35 goals, career high, 50 assists, 85 points. He's well on his way to another 100-point season. So yeah, I totally agree with you. And actually, now that I think about it, I don't think Artemi has had a 100-point season. He's had a few 90-point seasons as a Ranger, but never 100. So he still has a chance of getting that. But you know what? And I do agree with you. I mean, if you take Panarin off this team, the Rangers are a much, much worse team. They're probably they might still be hanging around playoff contention, but they're definitely not at the top of the league or close to it. But the guy that I want to really give a lot of credit to as one of my team MVPs is Vincent Trocheck, man. I feel like last year it took Trocheck a little bit of time to kind of fit in and feel right as a Ranger. But this guy has had such a phenomenal year this year. It seems like every time the Rangers need a big goal, Trocheck is there to make a big play. And he's scoring goals this year. This is a guy where if he has a really good last 20 games here, this is a guy that could hit 30 goals. And, he's got 22, so he'd have to have a really good run here. But he could get close to it if he keeps it up. And it seems like every goal he scores is a big goal, too. It's not like, oh, the Rangers are winning 5-1 and he puts one in to make it 6-1. It's like, no, the Rangers are down 3-2 in the final minute and he ties it. Or, oh, it's 2-2 in the third and he puts them ahead early, something like that. So I feel like all of his goals have been big, and the guy's a face-off winning machine. He's winning around 60% of his face-offs this year. So I'm a big fan of Vincent Trocheck, and he's one of the best free agent signings the Rangers have had in quite a few years, right?
Yeah, I just feel like that with all the everything. It's going to be one of the big signings and I just feel like he's going to have some big. There's going to be big moments that I'm going to be jumping up and down. I might have to fall down in a bar or something. It's going to be one of those kind of moments.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm definitely with you on that. And real quick, as we wrap up here, like I said, we're going to keep it a little short in this episode, but we'll be back for a bonus episode this weekend. As the just to wrap up, the Rangers today have acquired center Alex Wennberg from the Seattle Kraken in the first deal ever made between the two teams. The Rangers gave up a 24 second round pick and a 25 fourth round conditional pick Now, in case you're wondering, too, that pick that they gave up in 25 is the conditional pick that they received from the Dallas Stars in exchange for Niles Lundqvist, the defenseman they traded to them last year. And now it's contingent on him getting 55 points combined between last year and this year. And the fact that he's only at 31 right now, and there's 20 games left in the season, I think it's pretty safe to say that it's not going to get bumped up to a 3, and it's going to be just a second and a fourth for Wennberg. But, Wennberg, man, he's a former first-round pick. This is a guy that does a lot of the dirty work. He's not going to let guys get in the neutral zone very easily. He clogs it up pretty well. He's a relatively big body, and I feel like this is the type of guy, too, that flies under the radar and scores big goals in the playoffs, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I sense this is going to be another one that's going to be some big moments.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, Dan, I think that's just about going to do it for us here today on the Best Seat in the House podcast. Before we get out of here, do you have anything you'd like to plug for yourself?
Sure, I got to plug my Twitter account, Bobo103NYC, Instagram, Bobo718DK, the same username on Threads. Also, it's one word, Daniel Curlin on YouTube. You got all my Bobo content there on YouTube, which, by the way, if you subscribe to the Patreon, you get early access to my YouTube videos. In addition to episodes of Bobo's Trackside Minute.
Yes, that's a good point. And you know what? Now that you mentioned that, I forgot we have to promote it on social media. And everybody watching this episode will be the first people to know that now on our Patreon, anybody who signs up gets a week free. So you won't get charged for a week. You'll get basically a 7-day free trial to our Patreon, and you can cancel anytime with no charge before the 7th day is up, and you can take a look and see what we have to offer. So it's only $5 a month, but even if you're on the fence and you're not sure, and you want to see what me and Dan offer for our Patreon, take the plunge. It's not going to cost you anything. It's a 7-day free trial. So that's a pretty good value, right, Dan?
Yeah, it's a pretty good value. It's a great deal. Unlike those advertisements for ticket resale sites that say the Ranger tickets at this price, which is, by the way, unheard of for Rangers tickets. When I see these things, there's no way Ranger tickets at this price. Ours actually is the deal we advertise.
Exactly, man. So make sure to be on the lookout for that. Follow Dan on his social media. Follow me on mine. You see us in the bottom there. And also check us out at Best Seat in the House Podcast. If you're on Kick, we're also on Kick now, Best Seat in the House Podcast. If you're on Twitch, we're also on there now at Best Seat in the House Podcast. It's a Best Seat in the House Pod. So check that out. And make sure to support us wherever you can. We appreciate everybody and all the support that we've gotten. A lot of fun stuff. We had a great interview with Carl Hamburger from Who Are These Podcasts a couple of weeks ago. So make sure to check that out if you haven't seen it yet. And just a whole bunch of great stuff coming up for us, right, Dan?
Yeah, exactly. There's plenty of stuff out there for all of you to watch.
Exactly. And keep your eye on our social media too, because we'll be announcing guests coming up. I know there's a possibility of a guest coming up in the next couple of days to talk a little hockey. And also we're looking at having a guest on around WrestleMania time as we get closer and closer. WrestleMania is going on. We know our friends at the IWF have a big event coming on. So be on the lookout for that as well. So that's just about going to do it for us here this week on the Best Seat in the House podcast. As always, I'm Rob Kramer, joined by my co-host, Daniel Bobo Curlin, and we'll catch you next week, everybody, on the Best Seat in the House podcast. We appreciate your support.